It's the first week of October, and autumn is in the air. Here in the northeastern U.S., the most colorful time of year is fast approaching. In and around New York City, the trees are still covered in green foliage with only a hint of yellow and red here and there. So, I headed north to the Hudson River Valley in search of fall color. As I crossed the Cuomo-Tappan Zee Bridge, I could see splashes of color in the distant hills. And within an hour of the city limits, I found myself in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains with ivy, maples, and beeches glowing all around. I parked my car at a pullover near a branch of the Appalachian Trail and hiked towards a waterfall about a mile away. It's a location I've shot before, in different conditions. I had high hopes for a good shooting experience. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since my last video. I apologize for that. But now it's the first week of autumn and we're getting a little bit of color here in the Hudson River Valley. This waterfall I have shot 2 times before. Once before my YouTube days in pretty much in mid-spring, and once actually earlier this year when it was barely spring, but I've never come here in the autumn. I was hoping, after the fact that we've had about 4 days of constant rain in the area, thanks to the remnants of Hurricane Ian, that we'd have a little bit more water flow. But actually sometimes in a waterfall or cascade, too much water is not a good thing. So I guess we should be thankful for that. And speaking of the hurricane, my prayers go out to everybody in Florida and South Carolina and Georgia that were impacted by the storm. Hope you all came through it safe and sound, and along with your loved ones. So I'm going to stop recording right now and scout around for a shooting location. I thought the water would be higher, and that's why I'm wearing these wellies. I didn't really need them in hindsight, but it'll work. I'm probably going to stand somewhere in front of the falls and see what works. So let me stop here and I'll look around and I'll be right back. All right, so I've made my way to the base of the cascade. I've got a few compositional issues with this waterfall, which are complicated by the fact that I can't reach it further back from where I am because the big fallen tree behind me, which wasn't here the first time I was here. That's what happens, nature changes. So the falls are kind of high. Well, you know, not terribly high. Obviously, it's not Niagara Falls, but as you can see here, it's fairly steep. It's a double cascade. It has some interesting breaks in it. So what I think I'm going to wind up doing is taking a few detail shots like this area right here, which I think kind of looks nice. Maybe another over here. As you can see, somebody's thrown a few foreign objects like those sunflowers, which obviously didn't grow there. Some oranges at that level, which I'm going to have to clone out later. But I think I can get at least one shot of the whole cascade in one image and probably focus stack it. And I might even also try to do a panorama, a vertical panorama, and see how that works. That's what I did the last time I was here. I was not terribly satisfied with the results, but I don't know. I've got my polarizing lens on, polarizing filter on here, and you can see even though it's not actually overcast, but we're even deep in the woods here, and it's very shady. But even with shade, you'll see as I turn my filter around, it's going to have some different effects on the reflections on the rocks, and definitely on how much glare there is or isn't on the water. Actually, it's not as dramatic as an effect as the photo would be, maybe on this side. Yeah, so I'm going to basically expose for the brightest part of the image, which actually right now is this lower right cascade, and that'll allow me to bring up the rest of the shadows and such in post. As I was starting to say before, there's a high sky up there, which I'm not going to really include, except I'll probably just blur it out a little bit, add a little atmosphere. So I got something to work with. So I'm going to take a few images, and what comes out, reasonably well, you'll see right here. For several of the images in this sequence, I had to do several things, not only focus stack, but also to exposure stack, as the foliage was slightly moving and the slow shutter speed that I used to blur the water would have also blurred the foliage. So I wound up taking some separate exposures with a faster shutter speed in order to blend those in with the other images to get a cohesive image that was in focus back and forth. Alright, so I found a new composition, a little vignette right next to the pool. I mentioned before that somebody's been dropping flowers around here, like the sunflower that's over there. There's also a sprig of goldenrod right in front of me amid the rocks. So I think it makes a nice contrast, even though it doesn't really belong here. There's no goldenrod growing anywhere in this area, so it was obviously plucked and dropped over here. But it kind of makes a nice contrast of color between the bright flowers here and the colors of the stones here. Although the stones themselves actually have a certain amount of color, because this one over here is kind of, well, that one's dull, but the one right above it, which the video is kind of cropping out because of the different aspect ratio, it's kind of reddish, and the stone right below it is kind of reddish, and then you have these ones over here that are kind of on the blue side. So it's an interesting group of colors here, and I think it's going to make a good composition. I'm going to take a couple of variations of this shot and recompose as necessary. Right now I'm in a vertical position relative just to where the flower is, but I might zoom out a little bit and make it a square. Whatever final image you see, you're going to see, but I'm really liking the looks of this. So just a few feet from where I was just shooting, I found another little vignette. Basically, you got some little ferns growing out of the rocks here. Again, it's a nice contrast of life. In this case, actually is life that's actually supposed to be here, growing out of some place where one would think that life would have a hard time, but ferns can pretty much grow almost anywhere as long as they can get a foothold. I call it a foothold because they don't have roots. But this composition is kind of a nice little diagonal composition here, as you can see. Well, no, you can't see. I set the camera to video, but forgot to hit record. Dope! Yeah, I could have turned the camera around straighter, but actually I kind of like the diagonal. I think it just makes it come alive a little bit more, kind of activates the scene a little more. Again, this video is slightly cropped from what the actual composition is going to be, but I think it's going to work pretty well. My basic settings right now are ISO 100, f13, but the 4-second shutter speed, however, the wind is kind of blowing around a little bit. I mean, you can't really see it, but the camera can, and I can from where I'm sitting. So I'm probably going to have to pump the shutter speed up, and in order to do that, I'll have to raise the ISO quite a bit, maybe up to like 800, which is not terrible, certainly not on a camera like this, because it can handle it can handle noise pretty well. And while I have a minimal amount, probably at ISO 800, that should get my shutter speed down to a point where I can do something with it. The other thing I'm going to have to do, though, is use my shutter release, which I don't have attached. I'm going to have to go back and put it on, because 2-second timer, it's not really going to work in a situation where you have to time the exposure for exactly when the shooting is optimal, like when you have waves or something like that, or in this case, waiting for the wind to stop, or for the subject to stop vibrating. So I'm going to have to go back, get my shutter release, put it back on, and then you'll see the final image right after this. All right, as I speak, I don't know how those shots of the ferns worked out, because the micro jitters or micro vibrations of the ferns were very difficult to deal with, and so of the dozens of shots that I took, even trying to focus bracket, I don't know if it worked. If it did, you'll have seen it, and if it didn't, you won't. But in any case, I've come down now from the falls. It's getting about an hour and a half before sunset, and actually I'm already in the deep shade, being here in the hills. But I'm going to try a few flower shots, because down here on this part, away from the mountain, there's a little patch of these asters. I'm not sure exactly what species it is. If I can find it, I'll post it up. But I've got my macro lens here, my 100mm macro, and I want to try a few different things. What you're looking at right here, these two flowers, I've got exposed. Where is it? Okay, so I've got. Oh, I just touched them. That's how close I am. So I've got them here, as you see, very heavily defocused. And this is at f9 on video. On my stills, I'm probably going to shoot them at about maybe f4, because I want to get the background as deep focus as possible. And I'm going to try a couple of little abstract things. First thing I'm going to be doing, though, is focusing on each one of these two main yellow blossoms, and get them in sharp focus. And then I'll probably in post, I'm looking at a focus stack actually between those two flowers, because even though they're almost exactly in plane, they're not quite. And if I, in one image, I'm probably not going to get them both in focus. So I really got to focus back to the two flowers, and maybe the third was on the bottom here, down here. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that one in the composition or not. I'll try a few different variations. I'll probably move the camera around a little bit, and whatever I wind up with, you're going to see in a moment. The settings I have right now are ISO 200, 1/27 at f3.5 actually. So I'm probably going to try a few different variations. Hopefully what I wind up with will be something nice, and you're going to see it momentarily. All right, I think I'm going to make that a wrap for the day. It's getting pretty dark here in the shade. It's about an hour before sunset. I think I've gotten at least a couple of decent images, and hopefully if you agree with me and you want to see more of what you've just seen, please give me a like and a subscription. And any comments that you have regarding this content, I would really appreciate it. It would really help the channel. And hit the notification bell. It's going to be right down here, just in case you do decide to subscribe, and I hope you do. Then that way you'll see the next time that I upload content, which hopefully will be pretty soon. As I said at the very beginning, fall is falling, and as the foliage begins to turn closer and closer, to the city. I'm shooting right now in the lower Hudson Valley, but I'll be moving probably back into the city and maybe out to the island, because the island and Queens are pretty much the last areas to get decent colors. So again, thanks for staying this long, and I'll see you again soon. Bye now.